Hey guys, welcome to the No Brick All Bucket podcast. I'm your host, Alexis Guzman. Today we have a very special guest. We have the public address announcer for the Chicago Bulls, the Chicago Fire, the Chicago Bears, and the Fighting Illini. Tim Sinclair, how are you, man?
I'm great, Alexis. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Like I said before, thank you for coming on. It's an honor to have you on. To get us started, just tell us a bit about your profession, what that journey has been like for you.
Well, I thought I was going to be an architect when I first graduated from high school. That's what I wanted to jump into. And a couple of years into my college experience, I needed a part-time job and happened to find a guy I knew who worked in radio.
Yeah.
And he said, do you want to come work here a few hours a week? And so I did. And though I wasn't very good at it, I really fell in love with it.
Right.
And so quickly decided architecture wasn't for me, dropped out of school and jumped into radio full time and literally thought that's what I was going to spend my career doing forever.
Yeah.
And I always loved sports, but didn't necessarily think the two were going to intertwine. And about 15 years ago or so, someone suggested, hey, there's an opening at University of Illinois. You should apply to see, about being a PA guy, just to help out with random sports. And so I did, and didn't hear anything back for like a year.
Oh, wow.
And finally they needed me for a baseball game. And that's really kind of what got the train headed down those tracks. And, one thing after another, one opportunity after another. And eventually you start realizing maybe it could be more than a hobby.
Right. It's, like I said before with Angel, you're, basically the voice of Chicago. What's that feeling like, just knowing that your voice is what gets people hyped before the games, just that your voice is so recognizable within the city?
It's incredibly humbling for one. It's just never something you would even think of or guess. And it doesn't happen very often where one guy does multiple sports, although Chicago has one other one in Gene
Right.
Honda doing the White Sox and the Blackhawks. But that's not normal in cities. And so, for me, I love getting to go to high level sporting events and be a part of them in some way, shape, or form. And the fact that it's my voice that's tied to them is kind of fun.
Yeah.
But it's never something I dreamed of or planned on. It just feels like I say accidentally happened, although that probably undermines the amount of work and dedication it took to doing event after event after event.
Right.
But sitting here now, it really is pretty mind-boggling.
No, yeah, that's awesome, man. It's like I said, even when I go to the Bulls games, like my girlfriend gets hyped, just hearing the music and just you get the crowd hyped. It's awesome. What's the most difficult part of your job, would you say? Maybe not now, but maybe early in your career?
A couple of things. Pronunciations is the part that's not necessarily hard, but it is really necessary that you get right. That's one of my main responsibilities.
Right.
And there are some difficult names to pronounce. Even, Giannis is one of the best players in the game, but has one of the most difficult last names to pronounce. And so until you've said Adetokounmpo over and over and over and over and over again, it doesn't roll off the tongue, and it doesn't really look like how it's spelled.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably the most difficult. The other difficulty with the profession as a whole is, my life is dependent upon the scheduling of other people. So the NFL, the NBA, Major League Soccer, NCAA, Big Ten, whatever, like I just have to be available at those times, which in the grand scheme of things isn't a big deal, but it can be hard, especially from early fall through April or early May, to find any time to get away or do anything other than work.
Right.
And while I love what I do, I also would love the beach. That sometimes is difficult, but I've just got to take my trips in the summer for the most part.
Right, for sure. I was gonna kind of talk about your scheduling. You tweeted recently just kind of like what your schedule is gonna look like this past week, with the Fire, the Bulls, U of I. So just how you manage, your schedule, and is there ever times where there's conflict within certain organizations, about your, about having your voice for that team?
Yeah, everybody's on the same page, and I've just had to be upfront with all of my employers about what sports I do, who demands preference, who doesn't.
Yeah.
And everybody's been really gracious about that. As soon as a sports schedule comes out, I go to my calendar on my phone. I put every event in. If there aren't any overlaps, it's great.
Mhm.
If there are some that we go, there's two on the exact same night at the exact same time,
Yeah.
then I have to start sending out emails and making phone calls to say, hey, I can't be two places at once. The Bears are first. There are obviously fewer games.
Right.
That's really high profile. So for the 10 to 12 games and then, an extra event or two during the year, that's my priority, followed by the Bulls. And then the Fire and Illini. Generally, there aren't conflicts. Like, I don't think there are any Chicago Fire conflicts this year with anything.
Okay.
Although there is one day where I've got a Fire game like at 1 and a Bulls game at 7 or something like that. So that will happen. But if there are overlaps, we just work it out. But in general, I don't have to miss too many, which is nice.
That's awesome. Yeah. This is kind of like a random question, but is it ever a time where your voice like is like gone or something, or maybe you went out partying or something and you weren't able to maybe do your job?
Thankfully, I'm not a huge partier, so that doesn't happen very often. I would say it does get tired, like doing the All-Star game in Cleveland this year. It was incredibly public address heavy, not just the game, but halftime and pregame. Like there was just so much to say that I was definitely tired by the end. And part of that was, we got to the arena at 7 a.m. and the game wasn't until 8 p.m. And so I had 12 or 13 hours of rehearsals before I even did the game.
Yeah.
So it will get tired. Knock on wood, it has not gone out on me. Every once in a while, you get a cold or you have to drink hot tea or something. But so far, so good. I haven't ever missed a game because my voice didn't work. We'll put it that way.
That's good. That's good to know. And then kind of talking about the Cleveland All-Star game. Well, you've been on, 2 All-Star games, the one in Chicago and then Cleveland. What was it like knowing that you were going to be the one naming the players for the 75th anniversary? Like, I imagine that could have been such a great honor,
Yeah, huge honor. And I would say probably the top one in my career so far. I've got to do a lot of cool things, but that was really something special.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, I knew they were doing something at halftime, but I didn't know what it was, not ahead of time anyway, not before I got there. Once we started rehearsing and things like that, then I started to see how it was coming together. And once I did, I realized it was going to be incredibly special, and it certainly turned out that way.
Yeah. How did that come to be? Like, were you kind of the one they called first, or did you know already that you were going to be in the All-Star game for that?
I hope I was the one they called first, as far as I know. I don't know all of the goings on as to how that works behind the scenes. I do know that typically if there's something the NBA needs in that realm, I'll at least get a phone call. I got to do the bubble, which was cool. And then 2 All-Star games. I did the NBA India games when the Pacers went there a few years ago. So I called my first All-Star game a once in a lifetime opportunity. Turns out that wasn't quite accurate. And so I'll continue to just enjoy the chance. I know there's been a lot of guys who are in the league for a long, long time who've never done anything in the All-Star game. So I'm definitely going to consider myself fortunate and be thankful for it. And hopefully I'll get to go do something again next year. But if I don't, I've had a really great experience this year.
No, yeah, we're hoping to hear your voice in more All-Star games, in the future. So that's great.
Here's hoping.
Yeah. So I want to talk a bit about your transition from the Indiana Pacers to the Chicago Bulls, and how that kind of went to be. Like, did you try out for the Bulls, or they contacted you that they wanted you, or how did that work?
Yeah, that's a really interesting story, and I'll hit the parts of it I can hit. So when I got the Pacers job, I didn't ever plan to go anywhere. It was an NBA job. I love the organization. My family, my parents and sister and her family all live in the Indianapolis area.
Okay.
And so for a lot of reasons, it made a lot of sense. And I never planned to leave. Well, in 2019, the fall of 2019, the Bears announced that Jim Reband was leaving after 38 years or however long he'd been doing the job. And the NFL to me was one job that I could actually fit in my schedule. There were really relatively few games. And so I applied for that, but had no idea what was going to happen. Obviously, lots of people would want that job. And so I threw my hat in the ring. Well, like a month later is when Tommy Edwards announced that he would be leaving the Bulls and they were looking for somebody. And I saw that post and I consciously said to myself, I'm not going to send anything.
Right.
I'm happy with the Pacers. I'm loyal. I don't want to just leave. They've given me great opportunities. Well, then somebody who works for that ownership group sent me a text and said, I hope you saw this. Would it be okay if the Bulls contacted you? And I quite frankly told him no. Said I'm not interested. Not because I wouldn't love to do the Bulls. That introduction sequence is the best in sports, and I love the team. I'm from Illinois. I just couldn't see leaving the Pacers. But the more I thought about it, the more I went, if I get the Bears job and I already have the Chicago Fire job, then it would make all the sense in the world to have all three of my teams in the same city. And it's the freaking Bulls. Like that would be amazing. So that's why I sent a text back saying that. And then the process started to play out. They came and saw me at a Pacers game. Then I got asked to do the All-Star game in Chicago, which gave me a really great audition in front of a lot of the crew that I would be working with. But then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, everything stopped. I had finally had a couple of interviews with the Bears. I had a couple of interviews with the Bulls. But the Bulls still knew that I neneeded to hear from the Bears first.
Right.
And so I know this is a long story, but when I went to the bubble, we were off for 4 months. There was nothing happening at all. And then I went to the bubble, and in the bubble, I got the call from the Bears. Finally, they were able to move forward with hiring and offered me the job. And they had told the Bulls, they had been in communication because they knew, both sides knew. And then the Bulls called and said, can you do an audition from Disney at the bubble? And so I'm in my hotel room, like in a closet with blankets and pillows shoved in there and my microphone doing and now, that whole thing.
Yeah.
And sent that off. And then a few months later, the Bulls job came through as well. So it was a bit of a whirlwind and kind of a crazy story. But I ended up getting them both in the same year, in the same couple of months. And man, it couldn't have worked out better. I'm thrilled.
Yeah, that's, just two iconic franchises, to be a part of. I imagine that's such a great honor for you. Going back a bit about the bubble situation, I just kind of want to talk about how your experience was like, and if you had to kind of stay with, where the players were, or were you kind of somewhere else? Just tell us a bit about how that worked.
The nuts and bolts of it, they had two Disney resorts reserved for the NBA. And so our staff, so a lot of the NBA staff, and I think it was the top 4 seeds in the Eastern and Western Conference were all housed on the resort where I was.
Okay.
And while they were there's a tower, and then there's all these like little casitas, they called them. The players were in the tower. We were in the other parts, but the lake, we walked around the same lake. We had a pool that was reserved for them, but you would sometimes see them in some other places, the restaurants, all those things. I sat at a table next to LeBron and AD at a dinner once, and it's just, bizarre. Yeah. So I called it NBA summer camp though, because it really felt like that. Everybody was kind of sectioned off in this one place, and you couldn't really leave. Well, you could leave. If you did, you couldn't come back. And there was, you could fish and you could ride bikes and you could walk around the lake and swim and that kind of stuff. And then occasionally you'd get on a bus and go on a field trip. The field trip was always to an NBA game or 2. Usually we worked a couple a day for the most part. And it was that way. I was there for about 6 weeks.
Mhm.
And then I got in a car and drove across the state and did the WNBA bubble for almost the same amount of time. So,
Wow, man. Does it get exhausting just, calling games after game?
yes. But we had, every 4 or 5 days we would have a day off.
Okay.
And so that would give you some time to chill, relax, go to the pool, sleep in, whatever. But 2 games a day for sometimes 3 games for 4 or 5 days in a row. Yeah, you'll get tired, and it does get a little repetitive.
Right.
But again, I mean, I'm going to see NBA games, and I
Yeah.
realized I was jaded when there was a Pacers Lakers game, I think,
Mm.
and I was like, I'm
Yeah.
not going to go.
Oh,
Like, I
okay.
could have gone and sat front row, and because there was just a few people allowed in, and I was
Right.
one of them, and I could have hopped on the bus, but I was off that day. And it was just like, I've seen 40 NBA games in the last, 4 weeks. I'm not going to go to another one just for fun, even though I'm
Right.
sure it would have been. So, it does get repetitive, but again, there are way worse things in life, and I count myself very fortunate.
But yeah. And then kind of with that situation, I know the following year, how was that like, doing PA announcing with like no fans at all? Is that kind of eerie or what's that like?
It's not ideal for sure.
Right.
And, but I did get practice in the bubble because essentially there were no fans there either.
Yeah.
A basketball arena is one thing because they were piping in crowd noise and they
Right.
could make it rise and fall depending on what was happening on the court. And so, though it wasn't at all the same, it was better.
Okay.
The weird one was football
Oh,
because, at Soldier Field, it holds 60,000 people or whatever. And they were not allowed to pipe in fluctuating crowd noise. You
oh,
had just a
really?
low level crowd noise that had to stay the same the whole time. And then TV did the rise and fall of the crowd noise on their end. So everybody watching, it sounded normal-ish.
Yeah.
But in the stadium for the 2 teams and like me, it was a little weird. And so that took some getting used to, and to try to pump up a crowd that isn't there,
Yeah.
that was a little more difficult. But you start to forget and you get focused on the game, and it really is fine. But man, I'm glad to have people back, that's for
No,
sure.
yeah, definitely. And like you said, the energy in the United Center is like no other. It's amazing to witness. Um, would you ever consider adding another sport to your, resume, like you said before, maybe baseball or hockey, or do you think you're good with how you are right now and what teams you cover?
One of the beauties of what I do is it's not play by play, so I don't
Right.
travel with the
Yeah.
team. So it's just home games, which
Mm.
allows me to do multiple sports. Like if I was traveling with the Bulls, I could never do the Illini and probably not do the Bears,
Yeah.
just because I'd be gone too much. So to answer your question, maybe
Maybe.
it would have to be the exact right team and the exact right sport. Like I think hockey would be difficult
Yeah.
because that overlaps so much with Illinois basketball and with the Bears potentially.
Mhm.
Not to say I wouldn't do it, but the situation would have to be perfect for me to kind of try to figure that out. Baseball, always a possibility, but again, there's a lot of games, 81 games, 81 home games is a lot of games. And so I would have to make sure the rest of my calendar was so free that I could still have a
Right.
life.
Right.
So maybe, but I'm certainly enjoying getting to go, hey, I'm going to go for a week to California and do the 2K project, or I'm going to go for a week to Cleveland and do All-Star game, or I'm doing the Illinois high school boys basketball championships. So I get to do that. And if I had a lot of other sports, some of those things I wouldn't get to do. So it remains to be seen. That's the long way of saying we'll see.
Right. Kind of going back to what you said, being part of NBA 2K, I'm sure that must have been just awesome to hear. I know they did the video where they showed everyone, all the PA announcers doing